The sky burned red and orange as the first ships descended through Earth's atmosphere. Captain watched from the underground command center, his face hard and empty of hope. The invasion had started 3 days ago, and humanity was losing. Everyone could see it. Everyone could feel it. The alien ships were massive. Each one was bigger than any building humans had ever constructed. They moved with purpose and absolute certainty. Plasma fire rained down on military installations, power grids, and communication towers. Where the ships went, cities fell. Conventional weapons bounced off their armor like water off stone. Missiles that cost millions to make did nothing. Fighter jets that had protected human skis for decades exploded without causing any damage to their targets. The news networks kept showing the same images over and over. Cities with fire climbing into the clouds. Families running, empty streets, dead soldiers. After 3 days, the still kept coming, and humanity had already lost everything that mattered. Had been a military officer for 30 years. He had served in wars, in conflicts, in situations where humans fought other humans and sometimes won. But this was different. This was an enemy that had weapons technology that made human weapons look like toys made by children. This was an enemy with numbers so large that even if every human on Earth fought, they would lose. The radio crackled. A voice from above transmitted from the last communications satellite before they destroyed the network. "Command, this is Eagle 1. We are seeing movement. They are broadcasting a message on all frequencies." Turned to the communication officer. The young man looked scared. Everyone looked scared now. Fear was the only honest emotion in the room. The speakers came alive with a sound that was not quite language and not quite music. It made the bones in his chest vibrate. Then the sound became words, translated by human computers trying their best to make sense of an alien transmission. "This is the collective. We come as conquerors and administrators. Your world is now under authority. You will comply with the following terms. First, all military resistance will cease immediately. Second, you will provide resources and labor as we require. Third, you will contribute 1 human to serve in the collective fleet. This human will serve as ambassador and servant. This human will represent your species in our hierarchy. Select this human in any way you choose. You have 12 hours. Failure to comply will result in complete destruction of your species." The transmission ended. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. Sat down hard, 1 human. They wanted 1 human from 8 billion people. It was meant to be humiliating. It was meant to be a reminder that humans were now property. 1 human to show that they could take anything they wanted whenever they wanted it. The United Nations Security Council met in a bunker under the Arctic. They had moved there when the first ships arrived. The leaders of every major nation were there, all of them looking like they had not slept or eaten in days, which they had not. "We have no choice," said the representative from Russia. His English was poor, but everyone understood him. "We must agree. If we refuse, they will kill everyone." "They might kill everyone anyway," said the American president. She was a woman named Price, and she had fought in Congress for 20 years before winning the top office. She was not a person who gave up. But even she understood that this was different. This was not a problem that could be solved with politics or military strategy. "What about the selection?" asked the Chinese representative. "How do we choose?" "Randomly," said the UN Secretary General, a man named no relation to the Chinese representative. "We make it fair. We make it clear to our people that this is not punishment. This is survival. We select 1 person by lottery. Everyone has an equal chance." They set up the lottery system quickly. It took 2 hours to prepare. All computers across the globe were connected. Every adult human on Earth was registered. The lottery would be broadcast live. It would be fair and random. It would be honest. At least that is what they told the world. 3 billion people watched the lottery on screens and devices. 3 billion people hoped it would not be them. 3 billion people prayed to whatever gods they believed in. 3 billion people thought about what it would mean to be chosen. The lottery program ran, numbers spun and changed, faces flashed on screens, and then after 90 seconds the program stopped. The name appeared on every screen on the planet at the same time. Laura Mitchell, age 47, American, born in Texas, military record classified, current assignment Special Operations Command, clearance level above top secret. Laura Mitchell sat in her small apartment in Arlington, Virginia, watching her own face appear on her television. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply watched. Her record was classified because she had done things that the government did not want people to know about. She had operated in countries that officially did not exist in theaters that were never mentioned in news reports. She had survived missions where the casualty rate was 90%. She had killed and been nearly killed more times than she could count. She was 47 years old and looked 50. Her hair was cut short. Her hands had scars. Her body moved like someone who had learned to fight before she learned to walk, which was true. Her father had been a military man, and her mother had been a practical woman who believed that children needed to know how to survive. Laura had survived her childhood. She had survived her military training. She had survived 3 wars and operations in places where the rules of civilization did not apply. Now, apparently, she had been selected to survive something else. She turned off the television and walked to her closet. She looked at her uniforms. She looked at her weapons. She looked at the medals she had received for things she could never talk about. Tomorrow or the next day, the aliens would come to collect her. They would take her away from Earth. She would serve them as a slave. Laura had been a slave to duty her entire life. She had followed orders from politicians and generals who did not understand real combat. She had done things for her country that had broken her in ways that sleep could not fix. She had watched people die under her command. She had made decisions that ended lives. She had survived because she was strong and because she was willing to do what others would not do. Now the aliens wanted a slave. They did not know who they were choosing. They saw a human, a weak species, a servant. They did not understand Texas. They did not understand that in her world, the strong did not break. They did not understand that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe was a person with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The ship descended over Arlington like a shadow spreading across the sun. It was not the largest ship in their fleet, but it was large enough to cover an entire city district. The hull was dark, not black, but something darker than black, something that seemed to pull light into itself and refused to give it back. The ship made no sound as it moved through the air, which made it worse somehow. Humans expected loud things. They expected noise to come with power. This silence was wrong. Laura Mitchell walked out of her apartment building at 600 hours, exactly when the transmission had. She wore civilian clothes because they had not asked for military uniform. A simple shirt, practical pants, boots that had marched through deserts and mountains. Her hair was pulled back. Her face was clean. She looked like a person ready for work, not a person about to be taken by aliens to serve as a slave. People watched her from behind windows and closed doors. The military had cleared the streets. There were soldiers positioned 3 blocks away, just in case the aliens decided to change their mind and kill everyone in sight. But Laura walked alone through empty streets toward the descending ship. A platform lowered from the bottom of the vessel. It was smooth metal that seemed to shift and reflect light in wrong ways. Laura stepped onto it without hesitation. She did not look back. The platform rose quickly, carrying her up through the ship's hull and into a hangar that was the size of a football stadium. They were waiting for her. They were tall, nearly 8 feet high, with bodies that seemed too thin to support their own weight. They had 4 arms, each one ending in 3 long fingers. Their skin was not skin, but something like armor, colored in shades of purple and blue that shifted slowly depending on how they moved or what they felt. Their faces had no expression because they had no mouth, no nose, only 2 large eyes that were completely black and never blinked. Commander was ancient by standards. He had existed for 372 years. He had conquered 17 worlds. He had overseen the integration of 36 species into the collective hierarchy. He looked at Laura Mitchell the way a human might look at a piece of furniture they had purchased for their home. "You are the human," he said. His voice came from a device that translated speech into words humans could understand. The voice was flat and had no emotion. "I am Commander. You will serve me directly. You will perform duties as assigned. You will learn our language. You will adapt to our systems. You will cause no problems. Understand?" "Yes," said Laura. "Good, you will be more efficient than the others," he said, speaking to another who stood beside him. Both creatures turned and walked away, assuming she would follow. Laura followed. The corridors of the ship were clean and organized. Everything had a purpose. Everything was logical. There were no decorations, no art, nothing that served no function. They had built this world and structured it in a way that was completely foreign to humans. She was taken to a small room that would be her quarters, a sleeping platform, a terminal for accessing information, a refresher unit that was clearly designed for biology, not human. A small room with walls made of something that looked like metal but felt warm to the touch. "You will rest here," said the who had brought her. "Commander will summon you in 6 hours. You will report to his private chambers. You will learn your duties. Do you have questions?" "No," said Laura. The left. Laura sat on the sleeping platform and examined the room carefully. She noticed the camera in the corner. She noticed the ventilation shaft. She noticed the lock mechanism on the door. She understood, without being told, that she was not a free person. She was a prisoner who had been given slightly better treatment than others. She slept for 3 hours because sleep was a weapon, and she had learned long ago how to use weapons effectively. The next days passed in a blur of learning. The language was complex but logical. It had no irregular verbs, no exceptions, no confusion. Once you understood the rules, you could speak it. Laura understood the rules in 4 days. She spoke to the other servants in the language by the 5th day, making the other beings from conquered species stare at her with something like fear. "How did you learn so fast?" asked a servant, and being with too many legs and sharp mandibles. "It took me 3 months to speak basic sentences." "Your brain is not designed for languages," said Laura. "Mine is. Your species thinks in visual patterns. Mine thinks in words. I will not be faster at everything, but languages are a strength." They looked at her and said nothing more. Laura's duties were simple. She prepared Commander's chambers. She organized his schedules. She prepared his food in the way he preferred it, learning his tastes quickly. She attended to his needs. She did everything he asked, and she did it better than anyone had done it before. But while she worked, she watched. She watched how they approached problems. When the water filtration system broke, they sent 3 engineers to add more power to the system. Laura fixed it in 20 minutes by finding the blockage and removing it, noticed but did not comment. She watched how they made decisions. In a meeting with other commanders, the problem was presented. Resources were discussed. A solution was chosen. No one questioned it. No one offered alternative ideas. The decision was made by the highest rank present, and everyone else simply accepted it. She watched how they thought about warfare. When news came of attacks on outer settlements, the response was always the same. Send more weapons, send more troops, send more ships. Attack the enemy directly, crush them with superior force. Laura understood that they had conquered through overwhelming power. And because they had always succeeded with overwhelming power, they never questioned whether overwhelming power was actually the right approach to every problem. She understood that they had never needed to think creatively because they had never been desperate. They had never been weak. They had never faced a situation where they did not have more resources, more weapons, more soldiers. They had never come from a world like Earth. One evening brought Laura to observe a negotiation with a newly conquered species called the. They stood in a large chamber with walls that displayed star maps and tactical data. The delegation was brought in, 6 of them, all looking terrified. Explained to them what would happen. Their factories would produce weapons for the collective. Their labor force would work on projects. Their government would be dismantled and replaced with administrators. They had no choice. They had no voice. They had spoken. One of the representatives tried to negotiate. He offered resources, offered loyalty, offered anything if they could keep some autonomy. Simply repeated the terms. There was nothing to negotiate. They would comply or be eliminated. Laura watched the hope die in the eyes. She watched them accept their fate. The alarms began at 2300 hours. Laura was organizing schedule for the next day when the first alert sounded. The sound was a low-frequency tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The lights in the corridors changed from normal white to a deep red. The ship's atmosphere changed too. Laura could feel the vibration of the engines starting to move. Something was happening. She made her way to his chambers. He was already there, surrounded by other officers, receiving status reports from every section of the ship. Glanced at her and gestured for her to stand near the wall. She did. She listened. "They have entered the system," said one officer. "They are approaching from multiple vectors. They are broadcasting a challenge." "Challenge," said the do not challenge, they attack. "Yes, Commander, but they are also offering negotiations." Made a sound that Laura had come to recognize as something between frustration and confusion. They were a military power that had been expanding through territory for the last 2 years. They were strong. They were dangerous, but they were predictable. They attacked. They defended with overwhelming force. They retreated or were destroyed. This had happened 4 times. "Decline the negotiations," said, Prepare the defense fleet. Alert all shield stations. I want maximum power directed to the weapon systems." The officers moved quickly. Laura watched the system spring into action. They had spent centuries perfecting their defenses. They had technology that humanity could not even imagine. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They had nothing to fear from anyone. The first attack happened fast. A strike force descended on a fuel depot 3,000 kilometers from the flagship. The depot exploded in a ball of light visible from the observation deck. Laura watched it happen and felt her military training kick in. One strike was not an accident. It was deliberate. It was designed. "Why would they destroy that facility?" asked one of the junior officers. "It is meaningless," said. "We have 17 other fuel depots. One destroyed facility is not a threat." But Laura was thinking, the fuel depot was not meaningless. The fuel depot kept the ships moving. Remove enough fuel and nothing moved. They were smart. They were fighting like they were desperate. They were not trying to defeat the through direct combat. They were trying to make it impossible for them to fight at all. Before Laura could say anything, the second attack hit. A communications relay was destroyed, then another, then a third. Within 30 minutes, the flagship's ability to communicate with its outer fleet was severely reduced. Messages took time to send. Coordination became difficult. Was angry now. His skin had shifted to a dark blue, a color Laura had learned meant agitation. "Deploy the secondary fleet. I want to crush this force within the hour." The secondary fleet was sent. Laura waited for news of victory, but the victory did not come. They were not fighting the secondary fleet directly. They were scattered in small groups, striking critical points and then running. They destroyed supply ships. They damaged shield generators. They attacked in places where they did not expect to be attacked. They were not following the rules of warfare that they understood. Alarms sounded again. More critical systems were being targeted. The reactor chamber was under attack. "This is impossible," said one of the officers. "How are they getting past our defenses?" "They are not fighting us," said Laura. Turned to look at her, he did not speak, but he was listening. "They are fighting the ship," Laura continued. "They are fighting the systems. They do not care about your weapons. They care about the things that keep the weapons working. Remove the fuel, remove the communications, damage the shields, make the ship unable to function. You are too strong for them to fight directly, so they are fighting your weaknesses." "We have no weaknesses," said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Every system has weaknesses," said Laura. "Your problem is that you have always had enough power to fix the weaknesses with more power. You add more shields, more weapons, more everything. But they understand that sometimes adding more power does not solve the problem. Sometimes the problem is the structure itself." Stared at her. The other officers stared at her. No one had ever suggested to that his strategy was wrong. An explosion shook the ship. The lights flickered. An officer's voice came through the speaker, panicked and loud. "Commander, the reactor chamber is under direct attack. We have infiltrators. The charges are already placed. Our attempts to defuse them have failed. The reactor will destabilize in minutes." Turned to his officers. "Save the reactor." The officers looked at each other. No one knew how to defuse the charges because no one had ever needed to. They had always just added more power, more security, more weapons. Laura moved forward. "I can try," she said. "You are human," said one of the officers. "You do not have the technical knowledge." "I have field experience," said Laura. "I have worked with explosives. I have diffused improvised devices. I might be able to help." Looked at her for a long moment, then he gestured. "Go, you have permission, take a security team." Laura ran. She did not stop to think about whether it was safe or dangerous. She moved through the corridors of the ship as if she had always known them, following the layout she had memorized weeks ago. The security team followed her, soldiers with weapons and armor. The reactor chamber was a massive space, the size of a warehouse. The reactor itself was an enormous sphere of metal and crystal humming with power. Around it, charges had been placed. Charges. Laura could see them immediately. They were designed to destabilize the reaction within the core. If they detonated, the reactor would become unstable. It would explode. The entire ship would lose power. Millions would die. Soldiers were still fighting the security forces. Plasma bolts crossed the chamber. One of the soldiers fell. Laura moved into cover and studied the charges. They were simple in design, powerful but simple. They had an electrical trigger. The trigger had a timer. If the timer reached 0, they would detonate. Laura could see the countdown, 90 seconds left. They had tried to defuse them using their knowledge and their technology. They had tried to disable the electrical systems. But they were smarter than that. The system was redundant. Disable one electrical line and another took over. But Laura was not thinking like an officer. She was thinking like a soldier from Earth who had seen 1,000 different ways to die and had learned how to live instead. She moved forward, ducking under plasma fire. She reached the first charge. She did not try to disable it electronically. She physically disrupted it. She used her knife to cut the connection between the charge and the triggering mechanism. The connection severed. The charge was still dangerous, but it could not detonate on its own anymore. 60 seconds left. She moved to the second charge, cut the connection. The third charge cut the connection. The fourth and fifth charges, all connections severed. 20 seconds left on the timer. It did not matter now. The charges could not detonate. The timer could count down to 0 and nothing would happen. The word spread through the fleet like a cascade of light through fiber optic cables. The human servant had saved the flagship. The human had understood a problem that officers, with all their training and experience, could not understand. The human had solved the crisis not through technology, but through thinking differently. By the next day, Laura's name was known throughout the entire collective. By the third day, her actions had been discussed in the high council chambers. By the week, her presence was requested at strategic meetings and tactical briefings. Began to treat her differently. He stopped referring to her as a servant and started asking her opinion on military matters. He brought her to meetings where the highest-ranking officers discussed strategy. He introduced her to other commanders who wanted to understand how she had solved the reactor crisis. Laura explained what she had done, but the explanations never seemed to satisfy them. It was not that her method was advanced. It was that her method was simple. They had been trying to solve the problem with complex electronic systems and advanced technology. Laura had solved it with a knife and an understanding of basic mechanics. "But this is so primitive," said one officer, a commander named Vex who had conquered 6 worlds. "It is effective," said Laura. "That is all that matters." The battle with the continued for weeks. They learned to adapt their defenses. They learned to protect not just their weapons systems, but also their supply lines. They learned to think about weaknesses instead of assuming their strength would overcome everything. And gradually, they started to win, not through overwhelming force, but through adaptation, through understanding that the enemy was fighting a different kind of war than the one they had always fought. Laura was given access to classified military data. She was brought into strategy sessions. She was asked to predict what they would do next, and her predictions were accurate. She understood how desperate enemies thought because she had trained in desperation. She understood asymmetric warfare because that was the only way humans had ever survived. Then came the attack that changed everything. They had not just come to steal resources or expand territory. They came with a specific objective. Intelligence reports showed that they were trying to force the flagship into an orbital decay around a populated world. If the flagship crashed, the damage would be catastrophic. The population below would be devastated. The psychological impact would be enormous. It was not a military strategy. It was a political strategy. They understood that if they could make the people doubt their leader's ability to protect them, the government would collapse from within. Laura saw the pattern immediately. She brought her analysis to. "They do not want to destroy you," she said. "They want to make you look weak. If your people see your flagship crash, if they see millions die, they will stop believing in the leadership. The government will fall. They will not have to conquer you. You will destroy yourselves." Skin flickered between colors as he processed this information. His people had been ruled by the same government for 10,000 years. The idea that they could lose power through doubt rather than military defeat was terrifying. "What do we do?" he asked. "Warn the planet," said Laura. "Evacuate the population that would be in the impact zone. Make it clear to your people that this is an attack. Show them that your leadership understands the danger. Show them that you are taking action. Give them hope instead of fear." Acted immediately. The evacuations began. Messages were sent to the planet explaining the situation. The people were shown that their leaders understood the threat and were taking action. When the flagship did enter a dangerous orbital decay, it was an empty drama. The population had already been moved. They achieved nothing but the destruction of some buildings. The psychological impact they had wanted to create never materialized. The war turned. 3 months later, they sued for peace. They had lost the ability to fight an enemy that could adapt. They had lost the advantage of confusion and unpredictability. They had lost because they were fighting against something they did not understand. The High Council of the Collective called Laura to their presence. The chamber was immense, carved from crystal and metal, with the highest leadership arranged in a circle. Sovereign, the oldest of them all, had ruled for nearly 4,000 years. His skin was pale, almost white, and his eyes were darker than any others. He looked at Laura with an intensity that made some people break down in tears. "Human," he said, "you were selected as a servant. You have become something else. You saved our flagship. You saved our people. You changed the course of a war." Laura said nothing. She stood with her hands at her sides, waiting. "Our intelligence tells us your species comes from what you call a," continued Sovereign. "A world where survival is not easy, a world that forces adaptation, a world that creates creatures like you. Is this true?" "Yes," said Laura. "We conquered thousands of worlds," said. "We have subjected hundreds of species to our authority. We believed we were the strongest because we had the best weapons and the most resources. But we were weak in a way we did not understand. We could not think like desperate people because we have never been desperate. We could not adapt like your kind adapts because our success came from overwhelming power, not from surviving with nothing." Leaned forward. "What will you do now, Laura Mitchell of Earth?" Laura had thought about this question many times since the reactor chamber. She had thought about what it meant to be useful to the... She had thought about what her people deserved. "I will help you understand," she said. "And I will help you find others like me, because if you want to survive, you need humans, not as servants, as soldiers, as strategists, as people who know how to fight when they have nothing left to lose." "High Council will consider your proposal," said, "but I believe you are correct. The Collective will not simply conquer Earth. The Collective will make peace with Earth. We will offer alliance, not subjugation. We will ask humans to join us, not to serve us." 6 months later, the Collective made an announcement that shocked the galaxy. Earth was not being occupied. Earth was being offered a choice. The choice to remain independent and isolated or to join the Collective as an equal partner in a new alliance. The message was delivered by Laura Mitchell herself, transmitted to every government on the planet simultaneously. She sat in a small room on the flagship and spoke directly to the people of Earth. "I was taken as a slave," she said. "They believed that humans were weak, that we existed to serve them. They were wrong. What they did not understand is that Earth has made us into something different. The harsh world we come from does not reward weakness. It rewards adaptation, courage, and the ability to solve problems with nothing but determination. I survived as a servant because that is what humans do. We survive." She paused. The image of her face was visible in every office building and home around the world. "They are offering peace. They are offering alliance. They are asking if humans would join them in building something new, not as conquered species, not as slaves, as equals, as partners. But this is your decision, not mine. This is Earth's decision, not the choice of one person." The transmission ended. The global debate that followed was the most serious discussion humanity had conducted since the first contact with the... Some governments wanted to accept immediately, fearing the Collective's power and wanting protection. Some governments wanted to refuse, valuing independence above all else. Some governments simply could not decide. The United Nations Security Council held emergency sessions. National governments created special committees. Scientists discussed whether joining the Collective would help humanity advance. Philosophers discussed whether independence was worth the cost. Military strategists discussed whether Earth could actually survive alone against hostile forces in the galaxy. On the flagship, Laura worked with and Sovereign to prepare the detailed terms of the potential alliance. They were serious about treating Earth as an equal. They offered technology sharing. They offered mutual defense. They offered positions in the Collective's leadership structure for humans who could demonstrate competence. But there were also discussions about something else. They wanted humans. They wanted to recruit humans into their military forces. They wanted human strategists and soldiers in positions of authority. They wanted to understand how humans thought, how humans fought, how humans survived. "This is something new," said Sovereign to Laura. "Your species brings value in ways that other species do not. Other species are stronger. Other species have more advanced technology, but no other species thinks like you. No other species fights like you. No other species survives like you. My people are dangerous, said Laura. If you bring humans into the collective, they will change things. They will question your authority. They will suggest new ways of doing things. Some of you will not like that. Yes, said, this is why we need you. Comfort and certainty lead to weakness. Danger and change lead to growth. Your species will make the collective uncomfortable. This is good. The vote came 3 weeks later. Every nation on Earth participated. Every adult citizen was given the choice. The question was simple. Should Earth join the collective as an equal partner, or should Earth remain independent? The results were clear. 73% of Earth's population voted to join the collective. Many had voted out of fear. Some had voted out of hope. Some had voted because they wanted access to advanced technology. Some had voted because they understood that Earth alone could not defend itself against a hostile galaxy. The reasons did not matter. The decision was made. 3 months after the vote, the first group of human military officers was brought aboard ships for training. They were the best that Earth had to offer. Soldiers who had fought in the wars on Earth. Officers who had commanded complex operations. People who understood tactics and strategy at the highest level. They were brought to learn military doctrine. Instead, they taught them something new. They taught them about cover and concealment. They taught them about deception and misdirection. They taught them about fighting with limited resources. They taught them about adapting tactics in real time based on what the enemy was doing. The military command structure began to change. The strict hierarchy that had worked for thousands of years started to bend. Suggestions were made. Alternative strategies were proposed. Human and officers began to work together in ways that were uncomfortable but effective. Laura Mitchell stood on the observation deck of the flagship looking down at Earth. The planet was still beautiful. It was still harsh. It was still the world that had made her strong enough to survive anything. She had been selected as a victim. She had been taken as a slave. She had survived as a prisoner. And in surviving, she had changed the entire galaxy. She had shown the most advanced civilization in the known universe that strength came not from power and overwhelming force, but from the ability to think clearly when everything was falling apart. Commander approached her. His skin shifted to the soft blue color that meant satisfaction and peace. "Your world has changed," he said. "Yes," said Laura, "and so has yours." "I have a question for you," said. "If we had not invaded Earth, would you have ever served in the collective fleet?" Laura thought about the question. She had been a soldier her entire life. She had served her country with complete dedication. She had done things that she could never talk about. She had made sacrifices that no one would ever recognize. "No," she said finally. "I would have served my nation. I would have defended my people. And I would have died doing it, probably before I reached 50 years old. I would have been just another soldier who lived and died and was forgotten." "And now," asked. "Now I am part of something larger," said Laura. "Now what I do affects not just my nation but entire worlds. Now my life means something beyond just protecting my country. I do not know if that is better, but it is different." Made a sound that Laura had learned was laughter. "You are remarkable," he said. "Your species is remarkable. I am glad the lottery selected you." Laura smiled. "So am I," she said. Below them, Earth rotated slowly in the light of the sun. It was still a harsh world. It was still a place where humans had to fight to survive. And now, humans would bring that strength to the galaxy. They had believed that they were conquering Earth. They had believed that they were selecting a victim from a weak species. They had not understood that they were inviting change. They had not understood that humans did not break under pressure. They became stronger. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human expansion was beginning. And it had all started because one lottery had chosen exactly the right person to be taken as a slave. Laura Mitchell had been captured. She had been enslaved. She had survived, and in surviving, she had changed everything. The sky above Earth continued to burn red with the light of the ships, but this time it was not the sky of conquest. It was the sky of alliance. It was the sky of a new beginning. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, other species would begin to understand that challenging humanity was a very dangerous thing to do. Not because humans were strong, because humans never stopped fighting, even when fighting seemed impossible. That was the real secret. That was what Earth had taught them. And that was what the galaxy was about to learn. The chamber was silent. No one had ever heard the sovereign suggest offering terms to a conquered world. but no one argued. Laura Mitchell, who had been chosen as a victim, had changed the course of history. They did not know that humans were dangerous because they fought better when desperate. They did not know that the human species had evolved on a harsh world where weakness meant death. They did not know that they had just invited something new into their galactic order. But they would learn, very quickly they would learn. The soldiers saw what she had done. They retreated quickly, understanding that their mission had failed. The soldiers did not pursue. They simply stood and watched as Laura finished disconnecting the final charge. The ship's reactor continued to hum. It did not explode. Millions did not die. The flagship remained intact and functional. Laura stood in the reactor chamber, holding her knife, breathing heavily. The security commander looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You saved the ship," he said. Laura said nothing. She had just done what needed to be done, that was all. That night in her small room, Laura understood something that they would never understand. They had chosen her to be a servant. They thought she would break like others broke. They thought she would accept like others accepted. But they had never lived on Earth. They had never fought to survive. They had never been forced to adapt or die. They had never been weak enough to understand what strength actually meant. Earth had made her into something that could not comprehend, and she was going to use that to survive, no matter what came next. Laura Mitchell packed her bag with practical items. Clean clothes, a knife, rope, items that had saved her life in the past, items that might save her life again. Then she sat on her bed and waited for the ships to arrive. Outside her window, the red sky grew darker. The ships were coming. The end of one world was coming. Laura Mitchell was ready. She had always been ready. That was the only way she knew how to be.